Don Lemon, the liberal YouTuber involved in the city's church protest a few weeks ago, was just arrested by the DOJ last night in Beverly Hills, California. But wait until you hear what the unsealed indictment documents, which dropped this morning, actually says he was doing inside the church, because it is absolutely crazy. Okay, so first off, January 18th, City's Church, St. Paul, Minnesota. Pastor David Easterwood, one of the on-staff pastors at that church, also serves as acting director of an ICE field office. Protesters somehow figured that out and organized Operation Pull-Up to target and disrupt the church during Sunday services. And Don Lemon was there, live streaming the whole thing. But was he there as a journalist? Well, that's the question. And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Lemon attended a pre-operation briefing where organizers disclosed their target. According to the indictment, he stepped away momentarily so his mic would not accidentally divulge certain portions of the planning session. He thanked protest leader Nikema Levy-Armstrong for what she was doing and reassured her that he was not saying what's going on to his live stream. Think about that. Think about that for a second. A journalist protecting the secrecy of an operation he's supposed to be just covering? Yeah, that makes sense. Before arriving in the church, Lemon told his live stream, "We're going to head to the operation. We're not going to give any of the information away." When a demonstrator said that they had to catch up to others, Lemon replied, "Let's go, catch up," and then stated on live stream, "We can't say too much. We don't want to give it up." But what he allegedly did once he got inside City's church is what actually got him arrested. The indictment states that Lemon entered with the first wave of agitators and oppressed, threatened, and intimidated the church's congregants and pastors by physically occupying most of the main aisle and rows of chairs near the front of the church. Lemon told his live stream, this is all according to the indictment documents, that he saw a young man who appeared to be frightened, scared, and crying, acknowledging that the congregants' reactions were understandable because the experience was traumatic and uncomfortable, which, according to Lemon, was the purpose of the protest. Let that sink in. The purpose is to make the congregants' experience traumatic and uncomfortable. Is that the way a journalist should talk? Who is accompanying a bunch of anti-ICE protesters to find out what's actually going on and try to expose the truth behind it? Of course not. No, this is absolutely ridiculous. Lemon also said, quote, "The whole point of this operation is to disrupt," which is a crime under the FACE Act, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Lemon then approached the pastor and largely surrounded him to his front and both sides, stood in close proximity to the pastor in an attempt to oppress and intimidate him, and physically obstructed his freedom of movement while he peppered him with questions to promote the operation's message. Meanwhile, other members of the demonstration were actively blocking parents from accessing their kids in a downstairs child care center, and parents were trying to get to their kids, and they couldn't because protesters were blocking the stairs and refusing to let them down. Finally, the indictment states that at one point, defendant Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church where he confronted some congregants and physically obstructed them as they tried to exit the church building to challenge them with facts about U.S. immigration policy. Physically blocking people from a church is a crime under the FACE Act. That's the allegation that the DOJ is making. But here's what makes this even more complicated. Lemon, of course, claims that he was only there as an independent journalist. His video shows him saying, "I'm not here as an activist, I'm here as a journalist. And we're not part of the activists, but we're just here reporting on them." After the incident, Lemon appeared on a podcast proving his absolute bias in the whole matter by describing church members as entitled white supremacists. Now here's where all this gets really, really controversial. A federal judge reviewed the original charges issued the day after the attack by the DOJ against Don Lemon and said that there was no probable cause for them. Case closed, right? Well, not quite. Because that judge has a massive conflict of interest that you need to hear about. Federal Magistrate Judge Douglas Miko rejected the initial criminal complaint against Don Lemon by the DOJ. He said there was no probable cause, which is very rare because the evidentiary bar for probable cause is extremely, extremely low and extremely easy to meet. Now, Judge Miko's wife, Caitlin Miko, is an assistant attorney general who works for Minnesota AG Keith Ellison. Ellison called the DOJ's charges inappropriate and a wild stretch. He has sued the DHS multiple times over the ICE surge in Minneapolis. And days before Judge Miko's ruling, Ellison appeared on Don Lemon's YouTube show discussing the case. When Fox News asked the court about this marriage, they refused to confirm or deny it, citing only privacy about judges' personal lives. And that's not the only twist in this story. Assistant AG Harmeet Dillon, the head of the DOJ Civil Rights Division, criticized Judge Miko's probable cause determination, noting that magistrate judges have very limited roles. Their only job is to determine probable cause or not, and not to make any sort of a judgment on bigger nationwide policy disagreements. An appeals court declined the DOJ's emergency request to override Judge Miko's ruling. The chief judge wrote that there was no evidence of criminal behavior in Lemon's journalistic work, despite the fact that he caught himself on video violating the FACE Act by obstructing the door of the church and causing chaos inside of it and refusing to allow them their right to worship, which is covered under the Constitution. Now, despite 2 court rejections, DOJ arrested Lemon last night in Beverly Hills, California. The charges are conspiracy to deprive rights and violating the FACE Act, which the FACE Act, in case you don't know what that is, it's the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which protects medical places and houses of worship from obstruction by force, threat, or physical interference. 3 others were arrested with him: Traherne Jean Cruz, Georgia Fort, and Jamael Lydell Lundy. AG Pam Bondi wrote that arrests were made at her direction for the coordinated attack on City's Church. Now, to put all this in context, we need to understand what was actually happening in Minneapolis when the City's Church riot went on. It's happened right in the middle of an unprecedented ICE crackdown in Minneapolis, where 2 U.S. citizens who are actively obstructing justice and trying to protect illegal aliens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, were shot and killed by federal agents. Both in self-defense. Career prosecutors in Minneapolis had really big concerns about evidence strength on the Don Lemon accusations. When initial defendants were charged, no Minneapolis prosecutors appeared in court. All of these guys are obviously politically motivated. If they took up the case, there would be a mob at their front door the next day. Now, the DOJ sent civil rights division lawyers from Washington instead to prosecute the case. So here's what this really comes down to. Did Lemon cross from journalism into participation in the crime? The indictment argues his actions show coordination and obstruction, not just coverage. His attorney argues that this criminalizes journalism. By the way, this is the same attorney who represented Hunter Biden, just totally coincidentally, I'm sure. By this logic, according to him, embedded war correspondents could face war crimes charges for communicating with soldiers, which is extremely, extremely flawed. Don Lemon was caught on video violating the FACE Act. This has nothing to do with his communication with the protesters. No one cares about his communication with the protesters. What we care about is the fact that he was caught on video obstructing the entrance to a church and participating in other criminal activities. And here's where we as Christians and as conservatives need to think carefully about what we actually believe. Churches deserve FACE Act protection just as much as medical centers. That's the law. But judges need to really, really be impartial. When a magistrate judge's spouse works for an AG who publicly opposes the prosecution and appeared on the defendant's show just days before the ruling, the whole ruling is immediately under serious question. The FACE Act, of course, has been weaponized against pro-life Christians praying in front of abortion centers for decades. Equal application means it needs to protect churches as well, but equal application also means fair judicial process. The indictment's allegations, if they can be proven, which I think they can, all based on Don Lemon's video itself that he posted on YouTube, show obstruction and not journalism. Blocking congregants from exiting is not reporting on what's going on. But 2 federal judges have also rejected these charges on probable cause. That matters. So what's the takeaway here? First off, this is obviously politically motivated. Don Lemon is clearly at fault. He is self-incriminated by the video he put up on YouTube. There's no question about it. He violated the FACE Act. He disrupted a church trying to peacefully worship. And unlike all of his other liberal friends, it looks like he's actually being held accountable and facing consequences, which is amazing. It's the best possible thing that could happen. As always, I will stay updated on what's going on and will continue to post episodes and shorts as the case develops, because this is going to be very, very interesting and historically a very unique case. If you like this video and if you like my other content, please subscribe, comment, and turn on notifications so that you can get notified every time I drop a new episode. And also share my content around if you like it and if you think it would be beneficial to anyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week on The Carson Wagner Show.